Right, so what I want to do is, having heard all this wonderful stuff about the background and the context, what is i-STUTE and what are we hoping to do towards helping some of these problems and alleviate them. So, yeah, who are we and what do we do? We're funded by RC UK. I have to mention that because it's EPSRC plus ESRC, and they do like to get a mention in. We're a consortium of 4 universities, you can see there. And in terms of people, just running through, well, there's me, there's David Elms sitting there from Warwick. David is from the Warwick Business School, because we have a strong business input. Loughborough, there's Phil's over there, and somewhere at that there's Vicky. Phil's main interest is in thermal storage, Vicky is in consumer behaviour. Graham here and Judith at back from London South Bank are really cooling technologies of all sorts. We mustn't neglect the cooling side. We're interested in heating and cooling. And Neil Hewitt there, his main thing is electric heat pumps that work well and produce high temperatures. And there's also a bit of storage work going on there in Ulster as well. Okay, so that's who we are. There's a grand mission statement. We're going to save the world and stop climate change. Well, no, we're going to do our bit. We are trying to do our bit to reduce carbon emissions by improving heating and cooling technologies and their integration and real use. Slide very similar to the one shown before. We know how important heat is. It's probably worth a mention that, okay, that bit in red round there, that's what we're covering. We're not doing high temperature industrial heating. We've got to have direct combustion, but we're interested in that chunk there. And I really ought to fill in a bit of that as well, because the cooling is electricity demand, which will be in that other bit. But it's very difficult to get accurate statistics to know exactly how much that is. Fished out a number that 16% of electricity use in the UK is devoted to cooling. That's a big chunk, but it's a bit difficult to put up on there. Why the little I, apart from the fact that it looks cool to be an I something these days? The I stands for interdisciplinary, and the reason that we're interdisciplinary is that us engineers like to get together and form nice little boxes that might be technically the bee's knees, but are too expensive and nobody wants. So the idea is that we involve people like David on the business models to see what will actually sell, and also from the consumer behaviour point of view, that we're trying to produce something that people will actually want. At the end of the day, if what we do does not produce something that people want and other people can make money out of selling, it isn't going to happen. So we need to get this integration of everything together. So we've got this nice little diagram. So, okay, here are the scientists and the engineers feeding in. Here are our consumer behaviour and business people feeding in. And last but not least, we've got our advisory board, who provide us with a sort of reality check in case we just get too pleased with ourselves. And Howell there is the chair of our advisory board, and I apologised to him last night. I got everybody's logo up there but Sibsy, so it was too late to change it, but yes, Sibsy should be on there. And you can see we've got international representation from Fraunhofer in Germany. We've got CSIRO, who do a lot of good work in energy in Australia. We've got, yeah, the usual suspects, the great and the good. So, okay, they're all feeding in, and what we're trying to do is produce all these outputs, which are really information to the real world that hopefully will result in new products, in change, in actually achieving something, rather than just producing a nice report at the end of however many years. So for the remainder of 5–10 minutes, I just want to run through the projects that we're working on in no particular order. In fact, that's not even all of them. It's not a full list. It's not even everything that's important, but keeping a perspective, we've got funding for these 4 universities for 5 years. That's not going to change the world. So what we've done is to pick on the things that have got high CO2 reduction potential and that we think we can do something about, we've got the expertise, and pick on those to have as big an impact as we can. That's what it's all about. So, okay, now just I'll run through, as I say, no particular order. One of the projects, the one that I'm interested in most, is gas-powered heat pumps. So, in a nutshell, throw away your condensing boiler, put a different box in, have a reduction of at least 30% in your fuel bills. Reasons for that, apart from the CO2 reduction, we've already had Lindsay and others talking about the demands on the grid. So that's another reason for saying in a future heating scenario, there's still going to be some gas around, let's use it as efficiently as we can. And what we did in a previous project was to build a box that's still about that big and that high, and it didn't work quite as well as it should have done, but it did work. And that was the technical concept. Big box outside the house, burns gas, gives you hot water. As a result of listening to, well, people like Andrew's predecessor at Baxi, also talking to Vicky, who did some consumer research, what we really need to be doing is effectively a split system where you've got a much smaller box outside because people don't want a damn great box in the backyard on the whole, and something inside that looks like a gas boiler, feels like a gas boiler, behaves like a gas boiler, but costs you less. People don't want change, they want it to be just the same but cost them less. And yeah, ideally it should pay back for itself in about 3 years. So yeah, piece of cake. No, not really. Another project, this is going on at Loughborough. And again, this is related to what Lindsay and others talked about previously. We'd like to have lots of electric heat pumps out there, reduce CO2 emissions, but if we look at, I think this is one I stole from, yes, Steve Marlin. This is peak demand in 2010 for the electricity network, and those are a couple of scenarios for what would happen in 2050 if we went down the all-electric route and everyone had a heat pump. And that's a big problem. You need vast infrastructure improvements. It's a big issue. Part of the solution might be to actually store heat. So you can take some of the big peaks and troughs out of there by having a little heat pump running all the time, charging up a heat store, and then discharging it into your house to reduce just a bit of buffering in the load, really. So that's part of the solution. And at Loughborough they've got it's both a short-term project and a short-term store. A few hours worth of heat storage to buffer your output between your heat pump and your house, and based on phase change materials, comparatively straightforward technology. And then there's another project for the longer term and also possibly for more hours of storage where you can use chemical reactions to store heat and have still a very compact store, 5 times the storage capacity of the equivalent hot water tank. Okay, so that's another area. Not forgetting electric heat pumps. It's a well-known and sad fact that in trials, most electric heat pumps do not perform as well as they do in the laboratory. And there are issues to do with control systems, bad specification, bad installation, a whole range of things. What we have to do is to have real-life performance, have COPs, that's to say heat output over electricity input of 3, whilst providing water that's hot enough for you. So there's a number of challenges there. In previous work, Neil over there in Ulster has produced these lovely Dalek-looking machines that in field trials do the required COP. But with all the constraints on the amount of space available, on the load on the grid, we need to get a bit cleverer than just having that bit of kit. We need to have a package that integrates stores, heat pumps, control systems in some seamless way that the consumer doesn't know about it. That's the key thing, that it should just be warm when you walk in and it shouldn't cost you too much to buy. So the work that's going on now is really on this integrated package, storage-led heat pump development. Already mentioned quite a bit consumer behaviour, new business models. We've had some examples of that. So case studies, for example, for looking at new ways of supplying comfort to people, whether it's heating or cooling. Going to look at the heat pump and store combinations, look at all these smart systems for control and display information and so on. And as has been said before, there's various things appearing on the market there, so getting involved in that. Also related to heating systems, this sounds a bit boring, low temperature heat emitters, radiators. All of these heat pump systems, whether they're gas, whether they're electric, they work a lot better when they're producing water that isn't so hot. And so if we put on our techie hats, we say everybody should have a little fan boost into their radiators. It's a fan convector. And that would be the straightforward technical solution. You can buy some extremely expensive ones. But there are consumer issues there. There can be noise, there can be drafts, they cost more, and you need a couple of wires going to every radiator. So we started to do some work with Vicky at Loughborough on looking at the consumer's reaction to these things, deciding what will actually work, and maybe we have to compromise. You know, people don't want them. We've got to come up with something that maybe it doesn't have quite as good performance, but at least people will use it. And on to cooling, which hasn't had much of a mention so far, but is an important chunk of what we do. There is a considerable amount of energy used. You can see there's equivalent to more than 7 million tonnes of CO2 per year in supermarkets. And a big chunk of that is all those display cases with your chilled food in or your frozen food. And you can do an awful lot with existing technology to reduce that. There's potential for saving there of only 5 million tonnes of CO2 per year. So in one project, essentially Graham's working to produce a new improved cabinet that will have the same customer experience, we hope, that have much reduced energy use. And there is a further project which is sort of next generation new technologies which will go even further. And that's working with i-STUTE, with other, both manufacturers of cabinets and food outlets. Data centers are worth a mention, increasing numbers of them, and at the moment hopefully the data center is working and recording what I'm saying, and it's going onto the laptop over there, and you can all access this from the web later. Increasing amounts of electricity used all over the world in data centers, and the technology and the approach to the cooling of them is a bit brute force and ignorance. It's not looked at in a holistic way. There's a lot of scope for reducing the energy from data centers, and again, we have a project on that. Last project to mention, which is, this is a bit of a blue skies academic one. Well, I say blue skies, there's a definite need for it. It's an industrial application. Thermal transformers are magic thermodynamic boxes that will take in a stream of waste heat and convert a little bit of it to something at a higher temperature level and reject the rest to ambient. And where they could really have a big impact within industry is general process industry that uses steam heating. We're working with a very large manufacturer of heating systems in this area, and they see a big market for being able to take waste streams of condensate, hot water at 90 degrees C, that quite often cannot be used in industry, that come out of the steam system, upgrading maybe 30% of that back up to 120 degrees to use for fresh steam. And we also have the possibility, without going into the details, of incorporating storage in there. So when you've got waste heat in particularly the food industry, where you get batch processes, you might have waste heat at one time, demand later, and you can meet both of these together. Okay, so that's my sort of run through of the sorts of things that we're practically trying to do. Let me just try and summarize all that. Okay, so we're a bunch of business, consumer behavior, technical scientists, etc. people trying to come up with new solutions that are practical for heating and cooling. We would like some input to find out whether we're doing the right thing or not. Where I say tell us what we should be doing, we can't drop everything and do your pet project, but we would like your input. We'd like involvement and to make sure that we're doing something sensible, that it's going to be wanted. We would like collaboration. So we've got all these projects that I've mentioned over the range of controls, fancy heating, cooling, storage, etc. And as everyone has said before, there's no one technology that's going to dominate. We need all of this stuff to work if we're going to get to the low carbon future. And so, yeah, we're going to need all of those things there. And presumably, there are more ideas around that no one's thought of yet. There's going to be new things occurring. But whatever comes up, it's got to be possible to have it in an integrated system. It's got to appeal to the customer. Manufacturers have got to be able to make money out of it. And from the point of view of our research centre, we've got to come up with useful things. Well, we've got a 4-year life from about here, so 4 years to produce the goods. And there probably is a bit of pressure, but we'll do the best we can. That's it. Thank you very much, and I'll hand back to